Good evening. My name's Evan and welcome to Rocklin Graves. Ghostface is back on the big screen once again following the financial and critical success of the film that titled itself like a requel but was actually the fifth film in a running story. Nice. I haven't gotten around to reviewing any of the Scream movies on the channel yet, so this actually marks the first one I'm talking about. If you're curious about where I stand on these movies, I've now done 2 podcasts with Dylan and Luke from the Splattercast over on their channel, where we talked about the original 1996 film as well as 5 Cream, so check out those if you're curious. To sum it up, the first movie is great, but aside from that, I don't really care too much about these movies. They're fun. I thought 5 Cream was really good at the start, but it fell apart pretty quickly. Despite that, the marketing material for Scream 6 was actually really solid and piqued my interest, so I've been looking forward to this release for a little while now. This one's apparently different, just like last time.
Something about this one just feels different.
I'm something different.
This review will be spoiler-free, save for some trailer footage, so if you've seen any of the marketing material, you're safe. I went into this movie very neutral because I just don't have a ton of emotion wrapped up in this franchise. Really, all I was hoping to get out of this was a less frustrating watch than I found last year's movie to be. The New York setting seemed like an interesting way to freshen up the series and give Ghostface a new landscape to wreak havoc through, and I found it especially intriguing because if someone is stabbed in a small town like Woodsboro, it's a huge deal. In New York, people actually won't talk to you at parties if you've never killed someone. It's like a rite of passage. This seemed like it could create some really interesting and suspenseful sequences, and with this Ghostface being marketed as the most brutal and intense one yet, the stage was set for a really exciting movie. I definitely had a better time with Scream 6 than I did with 5, and I found it to be a solid improvement over its predecessor, despite some issues that we'll get to in a minute. The biggest areas of improvement are in the set pieces and the way the narrative is set up. Once the pieces started to fall into place, I found myself pretty interested in where things would go. The second act is probably the strongest because this movie's at its best before things get properly revealed, which is where I find Scream movies tend to lose me. The scenes with Ghostface are handled in a very intense way, and it feels like we have a much more competent, in-control killer than the ones who are falling over themselves in some of the other movies. There are a handful of great Ghostface scenes in Scream 6 that show a very intimidating killer. There's also a good bit of suspense throughout these scenes that have a very long build-up where you know something is going to go very wrong, but you're not quite sure when it will happen, and it keeps you on your toes. The narrative was much more compelling this time around, at least again during the second act when things are still being figured out and new bits of information are being revealed. I was genuinely curious about how this movie was going to answer the questions that it presented, but unfortunately, it does fall flat in the place that I find most Scream sequels fall flat, and that's in the reveals. It's hard to make a good murder mystery with a satisfying culprit, and despite how badly the trailers want you to know that this movie is different, there's really nothing unique that comes to light here. Without saying what it is, there's a countdown that's happening in this movie that I thought was really interesting, and I was really excited to see what would happen when we reached the end of that countdown, and it completely fell flat. Something that I have said many times about this movie is that with how hard they were pushing that this one's different, they really needed to deliver something that set itself apart from the rest of the pack. To the film's credit, the opening scene is something unique. It's something I've never seen in a Scream movie, and I really enjoyed it, but the ending just retreads old ground, and it really didn't feel deserving of being touted as this bold new take on the franchise. That being said, I did not find the third act of this movie to be as offensively irritating as the last one. It's not blatantly stupid in the same way, but it just felt really lazy and unsatisfying after what I thought was a really intriguing build-up. I definitely found the writing to be a step up, and I enjoyed the characters more, but the movie pulled multiple punches and the writers were clearly scared of killing off certain characters. People would get hurt in such a way that if anyone else suffered the same injury, they'd be dead, but the film doesn't want to kill them, so they just survive. There is one instance where this happens to a character that seems to be in reference to a legacy character who's no longer around, so I can kind of understand what they were going for there, but when it happens more than once, it just comes across as really contrived and hurts the immersion and stakes of the film. But if you're going into this movie hoping to just watch Ghostface fuck people up in New York, there's a lot of fun to be had with this entry thanks to the unique set pieces and amped up violence. There's enough here to satisfy general audiences, but I can definitely see that huge Scream fans will be let down by how little this entry expands on the characters and the overall story. It's definitely setting up Scream 7, and I really hope that that movie will explore the characters more because there really isn't much development here. A lot of it is just reiterating things that Scream 2022 introduced, but even though there's not much in terms of fleshing these people out, I did enjoy watching them interact. There's a really solid chemistry with the cast that can be a lot of fun in the right context. There are new characters introduced as well, and that's all there is to say about them. There was little work put into developing our main returning cast, but there was next to nothing brought out for these new characters, which is just, it's a huge shame. There's one dude in this movie who gives Sheriff Barker a run for his money in terms of pointlessness.
But hey, what are we gonna do? Cancel Halloween?
Scream 6 is a step in the right direction. It kept me engaged and entertained, brought some intense and sometimes suspenseful sequences, and the new cast of characters are settling into their roles very well and feel like a good group of people to follow going forward. But it falls flat in its narrative and doesn't push this story forward much from where we were in 2022. I enjoyed it well enough that I'd say it's definitely worth a watch. I'll probably be picking it up on Blu-ray myself. I had a really fun time with it, but just don't expect to be as blown away by this movie as a lot of the marketing material is implying that you will be.
You want me, so let's finish this.
If you want to hear more of my thoughts on Scream 6, I'll be sitting down with Splattercast once again to talk about spoilers, go in depth on everything that worked and everything that didn't, so keep an eye out for that next week. Until then, thank you for stopping by Rocklin Graves. I hope you've enjoyed your stay.